Welcome to Women Disrupting, a podcast amplifying the voice of women who are disrupting the status quo to create a more equitable, united, and peaceful world. In this podcast episode, I speak with Stef McLoughlin, who works at Lewes Football Club based in East Sussex. And wait for this, the first gender equal football club in the world. One thing Stef made me realise in this conversation is that if we are going to create more equity for women in the world of football, paradigms need to shift. And that means not just looking at how female players are treated, but serving the female fan base as well. So Stef talks me through how she and the team at Lewes are disrupting the status quo in football to pave the way for women. From breastfeeding facilities in the stands to serving up more healthy vegan options at halftime, the team at Lewes FC are revolutionary in their approach. I hope you are as inspired by this episode as I was when I spoke to Stef. Stef, thank you for joining me for today's podcast. I'm so excited for you to talk a little bit about your role in football and how you're disrupting the status quo. But before we go into that, just give me a little bit of information about your story and background before you were appointed as commercial manager at Lewes Football Club.
I would have never imagined in a million years that I would be working in football. And so I got into football very recently. So I've only literally been into football for the last 4 years. I like doing things that are outside of my comfort zone. And I started playing football as a complete beginner because it was, for me, the most unusual thing I could have chosen to do, because football was not part of my life growing up, and the whole industry and the way it's set up is not set up for people like me. So I was looking into doing something which was fun, where I could exercise, where I could meet new people, and I discovered football. Through playing football then, I got really angry about all of the inequality within football that I wasn't aware of until I got into the space. And then I found myself working at Lewes Football Club because I want to use all of my anger in a positive way and to help the club change the world of football, basically.
Mm-hmm. When you said football wasn't set up and designed for people like me, tell me a bit more about what you mean by that.
I mean, from the very, very, very simple things like what you expect when you are watching football. So I watch lots of football outside of Lewes, and most of the time when I'm there, when I'm watching football at different places, there's no food that I particularly want to eat. I don't want to be eating greasy burgers. I don't want to be drinking horrible beer either. So even with, as soon as you enter Lewes, the first thing you see is a sign telling you where to breastfeed. And that sign is not there just because it's functional and because we have a breastfeeding room, but also because we want people to look at the sign and know that it is their space. So, back to food and drink, we serve cocktails, we have amazing food. You can have, the same sort of like Sunday brunch you have with your friends in a cafe, but you can do it while watching other incredible women watching football. So, it's starting from like the really small things, like making the place you watch football more inclusive, to adding a lot more visibility to women's sports in general. So in this country, outside of like big tournaments, so outside like the Euros, the World Cup, all of the big events that we see, visibility for women's football is still at around 10% to what the men get. So how can you be like a little girl or even a woman how can you be inspired? You can't become what you can't see. And at the moment, we're not offering enough visibility to young girls and women, basically.
And the football club sounds unique in the respect that you're doing things like the cocktails, the more healthy food, and the breastfeeding rooms, which shouldn't really be unique. That should be the norm, isn't it? So just give me some more context around the football club and what it is.
So we're based in the southeast. Our women's side are in the championship. So we play in the second highest tier in football in this country. So we're elite. Our women play full time. We're on TV. We're as professional as we possibly can get at this level. We're not always given the respect that we deserve playing at the level we do. So I'm very, like when I'm in meetings speaking to, potential people who could be working with us or people in the press, we often get called things like grassroots or, not given the level of professionalism and the respect we should be given. And I know that wouldn't be happening if we were a men's championship side. Our men play in the 7th tier of football, and we are a non-profit organisation. We are community owned as well. So we're owned by 2,500 people, not just in the Southeast, but in 40 countries across the world. So we have owners in Italy and in Kazakhstan and loads in America, because people generally become owners of the club as a vote, as a protest to the rest of the world we live in, and they want to be supporting something which is good.
When I read on the website or somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong about this here, but it says you're the first, is it gender equal football club? What does that mean?
In 2017, our men's team was thriving. So the men's team had loads of fans. They were a huge, typical non-league men's club, bringing loads of fans in, and they were the team that were resourcing the club, basically. Our women at the time played in the 3rd tier. They, the fans that came along were friends and family. The women weren't, really commercialized or bringing any sort of money in, so it was a bit of like an add-on, and there was people at the time, I wasn't at the club at the time, but the board at the time decided that in order for the women's team to thrive, they're going to have to be made equal to the men's team. So we were the first club in the world to pay our men and women equally, even though the women, we hear when we're trolled, we hear all the, oh, but you don't bring enough money in, how do you expect to be paid more? So even though the women weren't bringing in the resource at the time, they were still paid the same. So I mean, at the time that was revolutionary, and that what that brought was the women then, because they were being resourced well, brought in a huge fan base, but also the men benefited from that too. So the men's fan base grew and the club grew as a whole, and then the women got promoted to the championship. So it was, success all round. Our journey from that, our journey from equal pay has got a lot bigger. So within equality, within football, equal pay is a very, very small thing of what we do in general. So I always use visibility in club websites as an example. So, go on the website of the team you support and check what visibility the women get on that club's page. So when you open the website, is it equal, or are you just seeing men on there? When you go to their tabs, do you see like men's team, under 21s, 18s, all of the youth teams, and then the women's team, or are they given equal tabs? On Instagram, do you see men's team, the name of the men's team followed by men, or do you see the main club team, and then on Instagram the handle is then club team and women, whereas in our Instagram handles say Lewes FC men and Lewes FC women, because we never use the men's team as the default. Is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, our equality journey it's been really interesting, and we're still growing, we're still improving, we're still, our thing this year, for instance, is gender specific health, which is new for us. So for years we've always said that women have been treated like little men within football. So until very recently, we didn't have football boots made for us. Boots are made for men, and women tend to get injured a lot more playing football because there aren't things made for us. So we're doing things like tracking the players' cycles and then menstrual cycles, and then planning training and nutrition around that. So using like women's bodies as their superpower. So the whole equality journey is, I can talk about it for like 5 hours. It's vast, huge, and there's so much more that all of us can be doing.
Honestly, this is inspiring what you're doing. It really is. You're thinking about the kit and the shoes, to tracking menstrual cycles, which any person, I guess, in fitness who is training women should have an awareness of that, because it has an impact, doesn't it, on how the body functions. So this is all like you say, revolutionary, which is sad that it's taken so long to happen, but amazing that you're pioneers of it. But I'm sure along the journey you're facing pushback and barriers. So just talk to me about what some of those key pushbacks and barriers have been for you.
So in general, there isn't enough money in women's football as yet. So a lot of like the headlines that we see around women's football are all really positive. So they're all like, oh, the Lionesses have won something else. And it looks on the outside, if you're not in and you're just on the outside looking in, it looks a lot glossier. It looks like there's a lot more money coming in, a lot more investment, a lot more sponsors. But the reality, even if you're looking at, across the pyramid from like, the top teams in the country to grassroots, there isn't. The biggest barrier is we still need more investment. We need people to know that women's football we're basically a startup with so much potential. And if you invest in women's football now, the repercussions of that can be huge, whether that's somebody's own money that they want to invest in the club, or whether that's a brand that wants to get it now while it's really good value and get all of the amazing benefits from that. So the underestimating it is a big one, and visibility is also another issue that we face, and it's another barrier. So a few weeks ago, I found myself watching darts, even though like I don't really follow men's sports in general. And also, it's not really a sport I've ever watched, been interested in, but there was so much buzz and media and attention around like the one darts match that, it was the evening. I was like, oh, what am I going to do? I'm going to be watching this random darts match. It was so out of character for me. If women's football had that sort of buzz around it, obviously in the media, if we still weren't at 10%, then, when mum and dad are planning their children's birthday party, they could be thinking, oh, why don't we go to the women's football game down the road? Or if you're thinking about a gift, you'd be thinking about merch that you can buy. It's not internally, like it's not fully internalized within our cultural system yet, and that is definitely one of the big barriers.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point as well, isn't it? Because you do think, because of the Lionesses and the attention they, actually, yeah, we're getting there now, but actually you're saying behind the scenes we're not. There's still a lot of work to do. And I'm curious as well, because I coach a lot of women around leadership, and I'm fascinated with leadership approaches. And I went to see Dear England, which is all about Gareth Southgate's journey as a football manager. And actually, one thing that stood out to me was his approach to leadership and coaching. He brought in this woman called Dr. Pippa Grange, and she brought in a very more, I would say, feminine approach, where it was all about leaning in and being vulnerable, and approaches that perhaps go against the norm, that old school football managers perhaps would feel uncomfortable using. So I'm curious, in terms of the way you lead as a club and you coach the women and the men, I suppose, what does that look like?
So in general, the environment that we work in is an environment where you can completely be yourself. And that's one of the first things that was instilled into me in my first weeks of working here. So I'm comfortable crying in a meeting because, why not? If you've had a stressful week and if things aren't going well, and football's an incredibly stressful environment, why would you not want to work in an environment where crying is okay, and that should be okay? In general, I think the thing about Lewes is we would always encourage people to be 100% themselves. So, and that obviously has an effect on the environment and the leadership. But, I think the whole vulnerability and being able to be yourself and be vulnerable, I think that takes away a lot of the toxic, horrible stuff that you find, unfortunately, within football environments.
And do you do anything specifically? I know you're underfunded, but is there anything to specifically look at the psychology of the players and nurturing their minds as well as their physical fitness?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got a club psychologist.
Yeah.
So although we're underfunded and we desperately need more money in the women's game, everything still works at quite a high professional standard. So, we've got a welfare officer that works with our team, and we also have a psychologist who looks at, all of the normal mental health and mental performance things that you need, like within the team.
Obviously, you've talked about the challenges that you've faced, but I'm sure there's been some great wins and successes since you started with the club. So share some of those with us.
This is a really tough one. I mean, every time we run a campaign and we get the visibility and we're successful with that is always a great win. So one of the things that we try to do at Lewes Football Club is to try to get new audiences into women's football. So we have like statues, for instance, which are beautiful pieces of art within the stadium, because we want to get people from like the art world. We have a community garden within our stadium that's pitch side, because again, we want to be a place for the community, and again, we want to be getting people from other groups into football. So we ran a really cool veganuary campaign over January, and that was amazing. It was a really natural journey for us because we have really good vegan options. Just mentioned the community garden. We ran plant-based cooking workshops in the summer. But when we ran the campaign, the vegan community, we're next door to Brighton, so that's very vegan. The vegan community really, really embraced us. So we found women's football then being advertised and found in all of like the vegan magazines and websites. So, some with like following of like over 1 million on Instagram. So to have to run a campaign where then our world is then introduced into somebody else's world, and then to have loads of people from that world come to our stadium to watch football is, it's always really positive when we manage to succeed in doing that, and, to then grow our fan base. That's always, bringing in new corporate clients is always like an amazing win. We're so privileged with the partners that we work with. Our biggest partner is Zero, who you, as a small business, you might use Zero yourself, and they're one of the biggest investors in women's football in general. So they sponsor us, the Lionesses, and they sponsored the last Women's World Cup. So it's just wonderful to be within that space, and to be working with Zero. And yeah, it's just great when we become part of like other companies' strategies. And we become part of the same movements. That's always incredible.
And if someone listening was like, I want to go visit this football club and get involved or watch, I mean, I know I'm tempted now to travel all the way from the north down just to spend the day there. How would we go about that?
So you can follow us on all those. You can follow us on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and you're welcome. All of our email addresses are also on our website, so everyone's always welcome to get in touch. You can get involved in a number of ways. The easiest way is to become an owner, which is only £50 for 1 year. You actually get to run the football club as an owner. You get to attend our meetings once a month. You get to contribute. You get to vote on like the club's decisions. So for instance, the last 2 votes were one on kit. So our owners actually chose the design and were part of like the kit making process. And then more importantly, we considered getting outside investment into the club from an external source, and our owners were part of the consultation process. So we answered over 300 questions, and we took our owners' advice and everything our owners were saying in consideration throughout the investment process. So literally, you are running a football club when you become an owner. And then we're always looking for corporate sponsors. We're always looking for companies who want to tap into our fan base, be part of our movement, use us in their marketing campaigns and in their strategy. So loads of ways you can get involved.
That's amazing. It really is. I'm 40 and I'm actually tempted to get into football. I just wouldn't know how to go about it. So what's the best advice for women who at any age, if they want to get involved in actually playing football?
It warms my heart whenever I see this, but there's always within Sussex, which is where I live, there's loads of posts online about like new groups that are starting. So I think just take a look at what is in your area and Google and look on all of the socials, and maybe get in touch with your local FA as well, because some of those beginners teams would also be registered. The Sussex FA is really good at like organising recreational festivals, and they do that once a month for women over the age of 35. So there might also be something like that in your area. Also, check out your local football club and see whether there's anything going on there. I mean, we have within Lewes, there's a women's vets team, and we also run, it's called the Offside Rule and all that jazz. And it's meetups for women who are new to football and who come over and ask whatever questions they want. No question is too silly, but it's part of like you don't just automatically become a fan. It's an identity thing that you slowly build on. So we run these sessions to help women get integrated within the community a lot more. So so check out your local football club as well, in case there's anything similar.
I don't want to obviously offend the current manager, but when they retire, is there anyone who you think, I think they would be a great role model for football and they'd do a really great job?
I mean, I absolutely love Sarina Wiegman, and I do not want to think of a time where she's not managing the England team, because she's been absolutely amazing. She's just a perfect leader, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be, watching her in the last couple of years. We don't have enough women, even within women's football. There aren't enough women. I mean, in the last, I think it was the quarterfinals of the World Cup. It was around that time in the competition, Sarina Wiegman was actually the only woman manager within the World Cup at the time, even within the Women's World Cup. So I don't want to think of a time when Sarina I hope it is another woman.
Tell me what it is about her that you very inspired by.
Well, she's honest, and she shows vulnerabilities, and she appears strong, and she's just, I don't know, I can't put it into words. She's just inspiring and an all-round great leader, whether the team is losing or whether the team is winning. And I love how much respect the players show her when they're around her. I love you can just tell there's a really lovely relationship there. So
what's the barrier there then with women getting into football management? If she was the only one at one point, why aren't women doing that, do you think?
Women's football at a professional level just hasn't been around for that long. I mean, you are aware women's football was banned in this country for 50 years and only came back in 1971. So women's football was banned in 1921. So women's football, when the men went out to war and the women were at home and they started playing football, women's football was actually more popular than men's football in the 1920s. So the men didn't like this. And if you please Google this and please research this and please read the same sort of right-wing newspapers that may not be favourable to women's football now were the same ones in 1921 that were saying things like it's not good for women's bodies, it's not culturally beneficial for women to be out playing. So women were actually drawing bigger crowds than men's football. They were actually drawing crowds of 50,000 plus in the 1920s. So women's football then got completely banned. So you weren't allowed to play on any FA affiliated pitch or for any FA affiliated team or club, and it only came back in 1971. So we are 50 years behind to men's football in general. So that's one of the reasons. So we've got we haven't had enough representation in general, but it's just very new. We're still playing catch up, really, and that's one of the reasons why we don't have enough women in football.
Do you see perhaps any women, whether the players near retirement, have potential and there's interest in it? Or do you think it's still a thing where no, women don't manage football teams, it's just not a thing? There's appetite for it.
I mean, one of the reasons why I was on the radio this morning was because since 2017 in Sussex, the amount of women and girls football teams within Sussex has doubled. So it went from more than doubled. So it went from, can never remember figures, but it was something around like 171 to now over 500. So, so it is growing. When I go out for my Saturday morning jog, I'm amazed at the amount of girls football teams out playing football on a Saturday morning. So, so the world is changing, and there are more women's teams. So of course that will change, not just for women's football, not just because we need more professionalism and we need the game to grow, but also because if you look at, there's been lots of research which shows, if you look at people at C-suite positions in general, most of those people have played team sports when they were younger. So the pitch is really good representation. What goes on the pitch is really good representation of the boardroom and parliament and anywhere where you need to show leadership, you need to lose in public, you need to win in public, you need to work as a team. So in order to get a more equal world in general, whether that's in the boardroom, in large companies, in parliament, all of the places where we currently have inequality, we need more girls playing football and we need more girls on the pitch.
Yeah, I get you. That makes absolute sense. Just the point that you made about it, what's happening on the pitch is a reflection of what's happening in the boardroom. So let's hope we get some more in the C-suite, in the boardrooms, representing women and who are interested in the management, leadership and management aspect. Wow. Honestly, I'm so inspired on many levels here. And I'm sure lots of people who are listening are. And I know you've talked a bit about how people can get involved, but just give us a bit of a summary if they wanted to have a quick look at what socials are you on, if there's a website.
So on Instagram, we're on @Lewes FC Women and @Lewes FC Men. On LinkedIn, we're on Lewes Football Club. And the website is www.lewesfc.com.
Brilliant. And I will put all of that information in the show notes. So thank you so much, Steph. Honestly, you're welcome. Thank you for your time. It's been amazing. And I'm sure with all the great work you're doing, we're going to get there eventually and see kind of the world as it should be. So onwards and upwards.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. I'm always looking for disruptive women as guests. If you think you'd make a great guest or know anyone who would, then please email me with the details. You can email info@yasminarifcoaching.com. More details in today's show notes. Remember to show up and share your truth, because the world is hungry for women who show up and tell the truth, unafraid and free, expanding to the very edges of who they were always meant to be.